We're doing a series of lessons on the world evangelization, what has been accomplished, what needs to be done. In this particular lesson, we're calling it Fulfilling the Great Commission, and I want to focus on the part of the Great Commission which has not been completed. We're making good progress, but there still remains a lot of work which needs to be done. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24 and verse 14, Jesus said, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." Now, a couple of things I want to point out in this verse of Scripture. He says the gospel of the kingdom. Now, this is where a lot of people misunderstand what he was talking about. He's not talking about the church here. No, the church is a part of it, but the kingdom is greater than the church. The kingdom of God is what God is doing all over the world, and not only on planet Earth, also in heaven. Everything that God is doing, past, present, future, that is the kingdom of God. It will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations. The word nations there is a Greek word, ethnos, which we get our word ethnic, talking about the different people groups. This is what Jesus is saying, that the gospel of the kingdom will be preached to every people group, and then the end will come. Now, as I said, we're making good progress. In fact, this is a statistic that's very encouraging. In 1800, 75% of the world's population had not heard the gospel. 75%, just 200 years ago. But today, fewer than 28% haven't heard. Now, that's good progress. Good progress that we've gone from 75% down to approximately 25%. So good progress has been made. However, there's still many people that have not heard the gospel. At this present time, there are over 7 billion people on planet Earth. 7 billion people. And that means fewer than 2 billion are the unreached, are the people that have not heard the good news. But 2 billion people is a lot of people, and they deserve the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, the question is, where do these people live? Where do they live? Where can we focus our efforts in fulfilling the Great Commission? The majority of them live in what is called the 1040 window. Now, what this is describing is from the 10th latitude to the 40th latitude, from an area that stretches from Africa to Asia. That is the area of the 1040 window, where the majority of these people live that have not heard the gospel. For instance, it's in this area that contains the 10 least evangelized nations of the world. The 10 least evangelized are in the 1040 window. So it only makes sense that to fulfill the Great Commission, that we focus on making sure that those people have the opportunity of hearing the good news of Jesus Christ. It's in this area of the 1040 window that we find 85% of the world's poorest of the poor. Now, I'm going to talk more about this, the financial inequities in our world today, but 85% of that, the poorest of the poor, live in that area of the 1040 window. This area also contains of the countries that are persecuting Christians, and I'm talking about open persecution here, where people are dying for their faith. It's not just somebody doesn't like me, somebody didn't smile at me, or I didn't get a job promotion. No, we're talking about violent persecution, where people are harmed for their faith. 43 out of the top 50 countries that persecute Christians are in this area of the 1040 window. The 1040 window. Now, there's a few exceptions to that. For instance, North Korea. North Korea is, of course, one of the most dangerous places for Christians to be. There's terrible persecution that's against them, and yet they're just outside of that area. They're not a part of the 1040. But out of the worst countries to persecute Christians, 43 of the top 50 nations live there. Now, of the 77% of unreached people groups, I was talking about the ethnos from Matthew 24 and 14, where he said, will be preached to all the nations. We're not talking about political nations here. Because when we talk about political boundaries, those are the boundaries that have been drawn between the different nations, political boundaries. However, the truth of it is, many times people of the same people group live on both sides of those boundaries. And so what I'm talking in this, I'm talking about the people groups that have never heard the gospel, where the majority of them live. 77%. That's almost 4/5 of all these people live in this 1040 window. Now, what all these statistics are telling us is how we need to refocus our attention to fulfilling the Great Commission by reaching the people in the 1040 window. They are the ones that have never heard the gospel. The majority of them never heard one time. A lot of them do not even know what the name Jesus even means. I remember a friend of mine was talking to a gentleman in China, and he asked him the question if he had ever heard of Jesus Christ. And the man thought for a moment and then said, no. Is that something like Coca-Cola? He had heard of Coca-Cola, but he had never heard of Jesus Christ. And so there are millions, actually almost 2 billion people that's in this category of being what we call unreached. They have never heard the gospel presented to them. For instance, 1.3 billion Muslims live in the 1040 window. There's, of course, more Muslims than that spread around the world. It's more like 2 billion or just over 2 billion. But 1.3 of billion Muslims live inside the 1040 window. And so this shows the high importance of making sure that they hear the gospel. Not only do you have what is called the world of Islam, but you've got 900 million Hindus that live here. Of course, the majority of them are in the country of India. You cannot ignore India when you talk about fulfilling the Great Commission, because it's about 1/5 of the world's population is Indian. Over 1 billion Indians in our world. 900 million Hindus live inside the 1040 window. In fact, speaking of India, another interesting statistic is 1/3 of all people groups that have not been reached with the gospel live inside India. And so we cannot ignore India if we are going to focus on fulfilling the Great Commission. God help us to understand the significance of this and why, when we talk about the 1040 window, why that is so important to missiologists, those that are evangelizing the unreached. This is why it is so important that we focus on this part of the world. Now, a good question to ask ourselves is, how can we reach them for Christ? Because the truth of it is, most of us will never personally go to the 1040 window, and nor do I think we ought to go. I do not think that is the solution to our problem, is everybody moving to the 1040 window. However, somebody needs to go, and we need to link arms with them. So let me give you some strategy how we can go about fulfilling the Great Commission by reaching the people of the 1040 window. Here's the first thing that I would suggest. It's what I would call strategic giving. Strategic giving. I will start there. Jesus talked a lot about money, so let me talk a little bit about money here. When you look at the money that is given toward world evangelization, less than 10% of missions giving goes to the 1040 window. Now again, let me make something very clear. I'm not saying that 100% of everything that we give in missions should go to the 1040 window. No. We have international ministries all over the world that are doing a good job of evangelizing the people where they are. Those ministries need our partnership. They need our support, and we need to be involved with them. However, we need to be strategically minded when it comes to giving to make sure that we include ministering to the people in the 1040 window. Because when you look at it, dollar for dollar, the harvest that comes from the 1040 window is the greatest harvest of the unreached, the unevangelized. If we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, we must include giving to the 1040 window to be able to accomplish that, because that's where the majority of them still live. And Jesus has plainly commissioned us, go into all the world, what he called to the ends of the earth. And so this is what we might call the last frontier of fulfilling the Great Commission, is making sure the gospel reaches the 1040 window. So our giving must include ministries that are involved in reaching these people. We must make a strategic decision that our giving is going to include ministries that are a part of that evangelization in that part of the world, the 1040 window. A strategic part of our giving must be involved in giving toward helping these people hear the gospel. I'm so happy that I have been able to partner with and travel among many of these countries and many of these nations. I'm so thankful that we have the Foundation Truth book in so many languages that are a part of reaching people in the 1040 window. I believe it's got to be a part of our thinking. We've got to make a deliberate decision. I'm going to be involved in helping reach these people for Christ, because it is the command of Jesus. Go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to all the nations. And so a part of that is strategically giving to ministries in the 1040 window. Now let me talk about a second thing. The second thing I want to focus on is what I'm going to call strategic networking. Strategic networking. Again, I do not believe that God has called all of us to move to the 1040 window. That is not a rational decision. That is not wisdom, and that is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is we must make the decision to partner with ministries that are making a difference in those nations. Now, because of the internet and because of public information, I am not going to discuss the particular ministries which we have partnered with, but I assure you there are some very fine people that are working in these nations, and they're doing a good job. They deserve our support. They deserve our partnership. They need our prayers. They need to know that there are people that are praying for them in what they are doing, and become spiritual partners with them, link arms with them. So this is a deliberate decision. Not only do we need, not only do we need to be strategically giving to these people, we need a strategic partnership with them. Now here's what I mean by this. These people that are living in the 1040 window, they have identified over 2,100 unreached people groups. The majority of these, of course, are in this 1040 window. 2,100 unreached people groups. These groups number all the way from 10,000 to 100,000 people. So a lot of people, a lot of groups of people, ethnic groups of people, from 10,000 to 100,000, 2,100 such groups that we find that are still unevangelized. But here's another important statistic. Of these 2,100 unreached people groups, there are 1,600 that have neighboring people groups who have been evangelized, that have a similar culture and language. Let me give you an illustration. The country of India, which contains 1/3 of all the unreached people groups of the world, one of the states of India is called Nagaland. Nagaland, of course, is to the far east. Over 90% of the people of Nagaland profess to be Christian. And there are 10,000 of these people that have devoted themselves to helping share the good news with the Indian people. Now, I believe what we need to do is identify people that live in places like this, that have the similar culture, similar language. They understand the people because they're a part of them, or they're a close neighbor. It's like a cousin in the family. They're related to them. Because of that, they have a lot of inroads. They already know the information of how to speak their language, how to talk to their heart, how to share things that are of importance to these people. These are excellent international ministries which we can strategically link arms with. We can join hands and work together to fulfilling the Great Commission. The Great Commission is not a good idea. It is not the great suggestion. It is a command of our Commander-in-Chief, Jesus Christ. He is the one that told us to do this. And so if we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, rather than us trying to all move to the 1040 window and reach these people, it would be much wiser to link arms with neighbors, with relatives, with those that have heard the gospel that are in that area. That would be wisdom. Make strategic relationships to help fulfill the Great Commission. That's wisdom. That is wisdom. And if we will do this, then we will be very effective in doing what Jesus has commissioned us to do. It's our responsibility. See, one of the complaints that I hear from time to time about God, how can a good God send anybody to hell that has never heard the gospel? And they want to make a big issue of that. That's a bad question. Because the truth is, it's not God's fault. That is our responsibility. We are the ones that are responsible of sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. It's not God's responsibility. He's already commissioned us to do that. And as I mentioned, the gentleman that he had heard of Coca-Cola, but he had never heard of Jesus Christ. What a shame to us as Christians, because Coca-Cola's only been around for about 200 years. And the gospel, we've had that commission over 2,000 years, and yet to fulfill it. So what a shame when there are people that have heard of Coca-Cola, but they've not heard of Jesus Christ. That's not God's fault. That is our fault. And if we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, then we need to make strategic partnerships. Now here, let me give you a third strategy. We not only need strategic giving, strategic partnerships, we need strategic methods. Strategic methods. We've got to change the way that we think in communicating the gospel with the world. The main reason for this, of course, is because of technology. Technology. Technology has shrunk our world. Technology has shrunk our world. It is actually decreasing in size because Technology has made it a lot easier to get there. For instance, air travel. Air travel. Air travel has made it possible for us to quickly reach any part of our planet. Get on a plane today and be halfway around the world tomorrow. You can do it. I've done that so many times I can't even count them. Over and over again, I've got on airplanes, and tomorrow I'm totally different part of the world sharing the good news because of technology. Not only is it air travel itself, but what about the internet? The internet has become the superhighway of communication to the nations. By the internet, we are able to, and I do this continually, usually with my smartphone. But continually, I will get up and I'm communicating with somebody in Mexico. Then I'm communicating with somebody in Africa. And then I hear a message, somebody sent me an email from Europe. And that's just the way that we live. Our world has become global in sharing information. And so we've got to use the internet to be able to reach the nations. If we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, we must use the internet and technology to do it. See, it's by satellite systems that make communication possible with most parts of the world. I'm talking about going in the most remote areas of the world where you can't even get a cell phone signal. For instance, one of my friends was talking about one of his workers that was in I won't name the particular part of the world, it's just in Africa. I won't name the nation, but for him, this young man had to walk 4 hours climbing the tallest hill in the area. Then there was a tree. He climbed the top of that tree and he could get a cell phone signal so he could communicate with his workers that were outside his area. But with satellite phones, you can be anywhere in the world and it sends signals directly to the satellites. And that, of course, is a more expensive way of communication, but it is available to us to be able to communicate anywhere in the world. Smartphones. Oh, I hate it that I have a phone that's smarter than I am. But it's true. My phone will do countless things that I don't even know how to do them. It has all kinds of information stored. It's like a huge computer that I'm carrying in my hand. It's completely changed the way that we communicate. We must use these things to be effective and to fulfill the Great Commission. If we're going to fulfill the Great Commission, we must learn to use technology. Some of my friends, my younger friends, have been telling me for years, you've got to stop thinking about paper and ink and start thinking digitally. Boy, they are so right. They are so right, because that's the way that we have changed in our communication format. That now I was trying to print everything, and printing is still a good way of communicating. But the most important way of communication now is digital. You must learn to think that, change the way that you do your operations. For instance, let me give you a statistic that I learned many years ago now. Many years ago, I learned that there was a certain country in the world that broke all records for downloads of the Bible. And it came as a shock to me. What country would you think? What country? And actually, for 2 months this went on. They broke all records for electronic downloads of the Bible. Electronic download of the Bible is simply taking off the internet the gospel, the good news, the Bible, the scriptures, and putting it on your computer, your laptop, on your iPhone, your iPad, and you're able to read it electronically, digitally. The country is Saudi Arabia. Who would have ever dreamed that? Who would have ever dreamed it? Because it's against the Bible, against the law to have Bibles in Saudi Arabia. You can't go out and buy a Bible there. But by means of the internet, when it opened up, with the communications, Saudi Arabia had created a vacuum by not permitting people to have Bibles. They created a vacuum, and so there was this great hunger to receive it. And now there are thousands of people that have the Bible and reading it in Saudi Arabia. See, that's the world in which we live. A world of communication by the internet. And if we do not use these techniques, then we're not going to be able to successfully fulfill the Great Commission. I believe that we are the first generation that has the potential of seeing the completion of the Great Commission in our day and time. We have the potential. I'm not sure whether we will accomplish that. I will see that in my day, but I know that it's going to happen. And one of the driving factors is the electronics, the technology that is taking place. Now, I want to close with a good question, a question that every one of us must answer, and that is, why should anyone hear the gospel twice until everyone has heard it once? That's a good question, a very good question. Why should any of us hear it twice until everybody's heard it once? Jesus said, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world to all nations as a witness, and then the end shall come." I want to do my part in helping to fulfill the Great Commission. God, help us to find our place, to do what we can to get this job done. May God help us in our quest of fulfilling the Great Commission.